All right, so we just got done finished with a 2-day racing event at 2 different on-road tracks with the Losi Nascar. I took second place. There wasn't a whole lot of us. There was actually only 3, and we all kind of like handed things off. I think the stock limitation and the timing and everything else really kept the crowds down. But I know that a lot of you guys know I'm committed to making this box stock until we figure out that like something is a breaking point, which it doesn't seem like there is a breaking point, and make it perform as good as possible. We'll go back to the video here and we take a look at some stuff. By the way, my name is Chad and this is the Dorky and 40 RC channel. I'm gonna make the Losi faster today. If you take a look at my driving here, I'm running a blue car. Well, so is the great one, Ron Mick, and his car is amazing. I drove it and it is so smooth. It runs so great. All he's done is literally drive it, change some shock fluids around, and I think he played with the diffs a little bit, like just swapping out some fluids. At the end of the weekend, there was no fluid left in them probably anyway. The diffs, I mean, the whole thing was just spinning. So whatever, box stock, keep it that way. Now, you can see that my car just has this very weird issue when it comes back into the center of the track when I'm trying to make all of these corners. Like I just can't get this thing to steer and corner correctly. And we talked about in one of the last videos. If you haven't seen any of those, you're interested, there is a link in the description to the playlist, or you can click on the little eye up here and that will start you with all of our Losi NASCAR adventures. Everybody knows that these things have like a little bit of a servo centering issue, but it shouldn't be making my car this difficult to go from left to right, right to left. You can see in the sweepers, everything does really well. On power, the car drives straight. We did the little bit of a remote taping here, so the remote is more comfortable in my hand, and I have a little bit better control on that. Did a video on that one. You can take a look at the eye right here. It was the last video that we did probably. So what I've been doing is going through the car, and I found that I've got a couple spots that are binding in the car. And so, you know, we've got some things apart, and, you know, first thing, when you're taking one of these apart, you know, there's the exploded parts view. If you just go on to Horizon Hobby and click on the manuals down at the bottom, you can get this right here. So you can keep track of all of your screws and all your parts, but I definitely recommend just working on one part of the car at a time. Now, just because everybody wants to just keep talking shit, the box stock, I mean, it's an RTR car, it's gonna break, you're gonna have to fix it and put it back together. So let's just pretend that you broke your car and oh shit, we gotta take it apart and put it back together. That's what we're doing right now. But we're gonna make it a little bit better and find out why it broke. So I found a couple spots right off the bat that I don't like with my car. And with any type of RC car that you have, you need everything to basically, it needs to be free and loose, you know, like your arms, your hinge pins, things like that. Everything needs to be really loose. So the first thing I was looking at was I was looking at my pins and seeing if those are a problem. And I've already found that this arm here, you can see it wants to stick on me. So I've swapped pins and it's still sticking and everything else. So it's not a pin issue. So basically what we're looking at is we just have too much material there. Maybe as we drive the car, it'll continue to break in. Maybe it won't. But what we need to do, and this is pretty common, even on like my high-end buggy kits and stuff with the B7 and all that stuff, you know, usually you get a little bit of binding and stuff like on the hubs or something, and you got to sand a little bit of material off. That's pretty much what we're looking at right now. These are new molds, so everything's going to be super tight and really good. Now, in a lot of cases, you can fix this stuff by maybe cracking screws loose a little bit and then retightening or unthreading them and threading them back, whatever. But basically, in this point, what we're going to have to do is take off this arm, and we can either remove material from the center brace here, or we can sand a little bit off the top and the bottom of the arm. Now I noticed the same thing here on the steering knuckles. Even backing the screws in and out, these are plastic pivot balls inside there, so they're never going to be like completely free as you might want them to be, but it just makes me sleep better at night if I know that there's no binding in there. So what I've done is I'm just taking off the steering knuckles and I'm grabbing a file. You don't need to get super crazy with this, but you just want to go in to all of the different edges. So like underneath here, between where the arms and the pivot ball ride in both spots, and then here where your steering linkage is, and you want to just take off a little bit of material and make sure that all of that is free. So that way you can get as much flippy floppy on that as you can. We need everything to be free. So that way we can have balance, we can have speed, we can have all of that good stuff. And then while you got all of this apart, it's always a good idea to start checking out all of your other parts. If you got your bearings out, these aren't going to be the best bearings. They're just a cheap rubber seal. You can see the just imprints and the cheap rubber that's in there. So make sure those are all spinning freely. And if you want to lubricate them, you can do something like that. In the front, you do have your CV axles, which, they don't come with any type of high wear grease or nothing like that. If you've got any type of black grease or anything that is a high friction grease, you can put a little bit of that in there. And really, besides making it a little bit faster, it might slow it down at first until it kind of wears in a little bit. It's really just going to make things last longer. You're not going to like wear down those bearings and wear down those plastics and stuff like that. And it comes back to the motto. We're running box stock, right? We're trying to keep the cost of this car to the minimum, the performance to the maximum, and the fun to the maximum. So let me go ahead and finish off this stuff, and we'll see how my results work here on the bench. The steering assembly on the Groms here is also a thing that's just, it can be kind of annoying. So while you have, this stuff off, you got your steering pins in here that, of course, your steering assembly rides on. And you want to make sure that you can see how it's wiggling up and down on the pin right here. So you want to make sure that that is free as well. I mean, honestly, what would be great is if we had some way to hog out those holes. But, that's neither here nor there. Now, I could definitely tell, again, one side is moving up and down more than the other is. So I need to do a little bit more of a closer investigating here and find out what is going on. But a lot of this could explain my issues and why it's handling so poorly. And, we haven't even got to the back end yet, but, I can sit here and kind of play with these already, and you could see that back end back there is super like sticky on that side compared to this one. See how nice and floppy, and then that one just fell down. So, you kind of see what we're working off with, but this is good that we're finally taking the time to do this, and it's going to make everything just that much better. Actually, I found the problem, and sanding material away and stuff like that is always a good idea, like we said before. But here is the 2.5 millimeter pin going into 2.3 millimeter hole, which it's always hard to measure, but you can see how easy that one is sliding. Now, if we come to that upper one that I showed you, look how sticky that one is. So that right there is definitely our issue. So the top hole right there is just not reamed out enough for this pin. So works fine. And this hole, no problem, nice and easy. Up here, very sticky. So that is, I bet that's our problem that's going on in the back. So that makes me feel a lot better, is that we just have some imprecise stuff going on. And so you can either drill these out, or if you had a 2.5 millimeter reamer, which I know a lot of people probably just don't have one of those laying around, that will probably fix your issue. I did take material off of that arm that I showed you was sticking in the front, and it was still sticking, and I'm sitting here scratching my head. So I looked at the holes, and that was another trick that we learned back in the day. And that is why I have a 4 and a 3mm reamer for my X1 2024 X-ray car up there, because there's a couple spots that you need to ream holes out for that too. So there you go. All right, so a little bit of finesse, and I think we got it. If you take a look, we've got, well, of course I'm lying. There it goes. I mean, it's pretty close. I think the combination of reaming out the holes and sanding down the material makes the difference. So in my case, so if you're having this kind of an issue, you might want to do both. I think ultimately what's going on here is maybe a little bit of the chassis is a little bit too thick right here, but it's really hard to like get to sand that area down. So we just got to take it off the inside of the arms. So I think a couple more passes and we should be good. I'll tell you the other thing. If I zoom in here, you can see clearly that there is sprue lines are there from the molds, and I can see some jagged edges there on the actual top of these arms, and I could feel them. So sitting there sanding away in here to kind of loosen this up, and I see some more here, and I see they're pretty plainly seen down there as well. So I'm probably going to take it a step further and probably sand the outside of these arms too. And I know a lot of you are probably like, man, this is like box stock racing or damn Horizon Hobbies. Like they just make junk. Well, I mean, you know, when these parts came off of basher cars, there's very few new Losi parts on here. So this is kind of what we're signing up for. And that's why we're getting some inconsistencies and some problems like these. And yeah, as I start to sand that back with this file, I can literally just see that mold line start to pop right there. So it almost looks like where you would cut the part off of a sprue. So I just kept sanding in the arms, reaming out the holes a little bit, and kind of still getting like a little bit of last bit of stiction, and just started looking at the part a little bit closer under magnifiers and saw all of this flashing material on there. And yeah, that definitely is the issue. So, wow. Awesome. Well, more work to do. All right, so we've got no more sticking. We've got nothing but flippy floppy going on, which is pretty good. So I would say the most important thing I did maybe was sand out the inside of the arms. I don't really know if the flashing on the end, it really mattered a whole lot. And then bored out the holes, and I think that is going to put us where we need to be. So we got everything back together. I did notice from when I had the car apart, I did a couple of screws that were in the wrong place. So I got those all put back to the same spot, put the body on there, and everything is lining up perfectly down there like we need to do. Now I've moved on to the shocks, and right now I've been going with 80 weight just because, you know, like I said, Ron is like the on-road guy, and he's been testing this thing. He really loves it because it's just simple, and he sees it as a great asset for RC racing, especially for on-road racing, where cars can get to be super duper expensive. Even as a few people in my TTO2 videos have pointed out, the TTO2 is not a cheap kit. You know, of course it's $120, $150 for the car, and you get a motor and ESC. But when you add the necessary add-ons to make the car run, and a servo, and maybe a better body, tires to run on, you know, you're looking at like $400. So we could basically go with this car, 190 box stock class, tune it out a little bit. And, you know, if we find that, like, for example, these shocks are just a very big pain in the ass for me and for a lot of people. And if there is a very dramatic performance to be had by maybe adding the Losi shocks down the road that you can bleed properly and turn this into an even better of an on-road car at an even better investment. I think the shocks are like $40. So now you're at like $220 for a really damn good driving type of a car. So the other thing that a lot of people were talking about was how to bind. So you actually bind by unplugging the servo, and I bound it up to my SLT3, which of course is not the stock radio, but the reason why I wanted to do it is I'm trying to test to see if that gets rid of the wandering servo type of issues because of the potentiometer that is inside of my remote. It also could be an issue of my remote why my car is not properly working. There just could be too much latency built into that remote controller. I do not know. That's why we test. So I'm going to test this out, and then I can easily rebind back to the SLT2 and just kind of see where we're at. I can tell you right off the bat that just having the SLT3 over the SLT2 is like an amazing upgrade, especially when it comes to steering. So, you know, it's definitely going to be an advantage right off the bat. So I don't really know how much they sell this for, but I know that most of the bashers out there, if you own an ARMA car, except for a Grom, you're going to have an SLT3. So again, we're just doing some testing and seeing what's going on, what improvements maybe we could make, you know, to make a modified box stock class. I don't know what we're doing right now. We're just playing. We're not running any points or season or anything else right now. My goal here on the channel is to basically find what is the best setup and lowest cost option to make this a viable, amazing option. It's even great out of the box. We know that. I'm also just trying to sort out my gremlins and figure out how to make things the best that there is. So the shocks, I put the 80 weight in there, and really when it comes to shocks, these things are just kind of a pain in the ass. I think everybody knows that. Really all I'm going for, because I am not going to spend like hours trying to build these with zero rebound. I am just looking to make sure they all kind of have about the same feel and the same amount of rebound into them, which is just going to be about that much right there. So I don't want a shock that's completely, I can tell, like doesn't have any kind of fluid going on inside of it. So these all four seem pretty similar to me. This one here might be a little bit lighter, but I've already spent so much time rebuilding this RTR car that I just want to run it and see what happens. So we're going to run it tomorrow at the track and see what happens for oval. Let's go. Ran the car at the track last night on the oval. Oval racing, it still had a little bit of push. It could be anything off power and just kind of feathering things in. It was great. What I tried to do, I didn't get there as early as I wanted to do, but I was kind of running the same kind of line just in the oval that we were running the day before at the race. And I could definitely tell that the car is superior at this point. Is it going to be as good as some of the other cars? I don't know. A lot of it comes down to driving, but the car itself just has a really good like roll and steering feel to it now. I didn't notice any of that like edging and sticking, and the recentering issues seem to kind of have corrected themselves as well. So I think that like opening up those holes and getting rid of that extra plastic and sanding stuff down a little bit really made a pretty large difference. I might be getting a little push on this car here because I have the front right for oval glued up really high over the radius. So it just might not be digging in enough on that side and standing up a little bit and not kind of turning as much as it should. But yeah, I'm very happy. I cannot wait to run this back on the on-road track. I might even run up tomorrow night just to run a few laps with this for an hour or two just to see how it is, because I'm kind of burned out on the on-road after the past like couple weeks of strictly focusing on everything. And off-road is this weekend locally, and I want to get the buggy out and get ripping around on it and just focus my attention on something other than this car. But I'll probably go up there just because I don't have nothing else to do, and we will check it out, and we'll be able to post an update video to see for sure, because I forgot to take the GoPro with me. I honestly didn't even want to race oval last night. I stayed for 2 heats and left just because I, like, again, was just kind of burned out from such a long racing weekend. So I think this thing is good now. Definitely check your car. I don't know why mine was so messed up, and it seems like everybody else's does things, but we all kind of have a preference for how we like our cars to drive. And this car just was not doing what I needed it to do. And I drove other people's cars, Ron's, and it did more than I am used to a car doing. So I definitely recommend that everybody take their cars apart, or at least pop off the shocks and the wheels and like check your arms and stuff. See if you might have any sticking points. For reference, just in case all these cars are the same, passenger front was where I had the sticking, and driver side rear was where I had the sticking, even though I did everything on here together. And the underneath part with the bumpers where the hinge pins go into, I bored those holes out front and back as well. So there's really no part of this car that didn't get some kind of sanding or polishing or boring out. And again, it's kind of just what we come to with this stock out of the box RTR type of racing. We do a lot of the same tricks with the TT02, and that's how we've pretty much made our TT02s perform as amazing as they do. And, you know, we've done a lot of that here on the channel, and there'll be a lot more of it to come. So, guys, got any questions, comments, any of that stuff? Been a long ass video. I know that for sure. Hit me up. We'll talk to you guys later. Peace.